I love it when a product surprises me. I mean, sometimes you think you've got it all figured out, but then the more you use a product, you discover it's actually something quite different. The Marantz Slimline series has been one of my favorite lines of receivers going back years now. Their newest model, the Cinema 70, may be the brand's best yet for one very important reason. Now, this 7.2 channel 8K capable Dolby Atmos surround sound receiver produces 50 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And while that figure is with only 2 channels driven, you do get Marantz's 70% guarantee, meaning that when powering 7 speakers, users should experience roughly 35 watts per channel from its Class AB amplifiers. While that may not sound like a lot, for most everyday use, you would be amazed at how far you can go with 35 watts. What's really great about the 70 is its preamp outs for all 7 of its channels and subwoofer, and it can be put into a strict preamp mode, effectively turning the Cinema 70 into a dedicated home theater processor, which is absolutely clutch for those who see their system growing and needing more power over time. In addition to its newfound flexibility, the 70 has 6 HDMI inputs, 3 of which are 8K capable. The 70 also supports 4K 120 with gaming features such as VRR, ALLM, and quick frame transport, all of which it passed with flying colors. Of course, the 70 can also upscale 1080p and 4K signals all the way up to 8K via an HDMI connection. And not to be overlooked is support for Dolby Vision and other HDR formats as well. Users can also take advantage of the Cinema 70's Ethernet or Wi-Fi capability, as well as HEOS for multi-room music streaming. The 70 also can play back music from services such as Spotify, Amazon Music HD, Tidal, Deezer, and more. And for those of you with Roon setups, the Cinema 70 is Roon tested. There's also support for Bluetooth, AirPlay 2, and smart home platforms like Alexa, Google Assistant, and Apple HomePod. For a deeper dive into the Cinema 70's specs, please check out our link in the description. Now, if this is your first receiver, the Cinema 70 is crazy easy to set up. Pro users can get as nerdy as you want with a full manual setup, but for the most part, this is almost a plug-and-play receiver. The Cinema 70 is smaller than your typical receiver and can be placed just about anywhere without having to buy specialty AV furniture. Making the right connections, it's also pretty straightforward, as the 70 isn't an input-rich device. It has everything that you're likely going to need and use with no added fluff. We use the Cinema 70 with 2 different multi-channel speaker systems, our B&W 805D4s with the HTM71S3 center. This setup worked with the 70, but let's get real, it's not the type of speaker system that is likely going to be paired with a more budget-oriented receiver like this. That said, when we added our Emotiva XPA amp to the Marantz's preamp outs, all bets were off. The Marantz Emotiva Bowers & Wilkins combo sounded fan-damn-tastic. But bringing things back down to earth, we did pair the 70 with Focal's new Thiva line, specifically the Thiva #1 bookshelves and matching center. The Focals, along with our 4 Klipsch in-ceiling speakers and RP1000 sub, proved to be a match made in sonic heaven. Seriously, we were surprised, to put it mildly. With the right speakers chosen and our Sony X95L, Apple TV 4K, and PS5 also connected, I quickly performed a full manual setup of the Cinema 70 using my laser measuring tape and SPL meter. Now, I did this in order to compare my settings and results with the Cinema 70's built-in auto-calibration software from Odyssey. Admittedly, Odyssey does allow for users to experience greater levels of automated adjustment with respect to room correction, but in the end, I just ultimately preferred the sound of the Marantz using my manual configuration, which to me sounded a bit fuller and more neutral. For the duration of this review, I will be describing the sound of the 70 with no room correction or EQ applied. Starting with music, whether listening through the B&Ws with some help from Emotiva or the Focals, the Marantz Cinema 70 was very even keel with just a hint of character. The 70 isn't neutral, but it isn't what I would call warm, veiled, or dark, nor is it bright. But it is smooth. When listening to Birds by Dominique Fils Ami, the 70 didn't quite match the sheer and utter transparency or just immediacy of the $1 million Wilson system we recently heard. But you know what? I still enjoyed myself. For the price of one of the Wilson System's high-end interconnects, you can buy the Cinema 70 in like a grip of Focal Thivas and a sub and get 65 to 70% of the way there. And honestly, probably have just as much fun doing it, only you're gonna have a lot more money left in your pocket. But I digress. As a stereo receiver, the 70's presentation was uncolored but a little soft at the extremes, resulting in highs that were never fatiguing but still possessing good detail and extension. The mid-range, bang on for me, and the bass was firm-ish, though not quite as grippy or as textural as the costlier ONKYO RZ50 or RZ70. Now, feathering in our subwoofer definitely paid dividends in the 70's ability to reproduce true-to-life scale and weight, not to mention it brought about significant gains in the dynamics department. Listening to the track Birds, the Marantz soundstage was exceptional. Paired with the right speakers, the 70 can totally pull double duty as a home theater receiver and a more audiophile-centric stereo one, especially in its pure direct or direct sound profiles. Shifting gears to home theater, which also includes spatial audio and Atmos, the 70 is surprisingly good. I know some enthusiasts will dismiss the 70's more lifestyle looks and modest power output as being more of a toy than a real home theater tool, but they'd be wrong to do so. Watching the new Transformers movie, which is terrible, by the way, the 70 was quite eye-opening. The Atmos presentation via the focals was very engaging. The Marantz kept me watching this film way longer than I should have, and surround cues, they were placed accurately with precise and clear travel front to back and left to right. The Cinema 70 didn't quite pull off Sony levels of surround, but for a receiver that costs a third as much while taking up way less space, I wasn't mad at it. Now, dialogue, at least to me, was clear and intelligible through either center speaker we used throughout our tests. I had no issues discerning the southern drawls throughout the many seasons of Justified Kristi and I consumed during our evaluation period. If for whatever reason you require more dialogue enhancements, the Marantz does have a dialogue boost feature which you can set to low, medium, or high. Now, doing this will skew the receiver's overall frequency response, becoming more treble forward, which is why I recommend using this setting sparingly or in its low setting to avoid, introducing sibilance to just about everything. All in all, for a receiver that produces approximately 35 watts per channel, all channels driven, you wouldn't really know it. For the Marantz easily drove the focals to reference levels without any signs of distortion or strain in our room. Those of you with more simple, say 5.1.2 setups, or who enjoy home theater in small to medium-sized rooms, should definitely consider the 70 alongside similarly priced or spec'd alternatives. And while I can sign off here and give the 70 my seal of approval, I cannot stress how potentially game-changing it is for a receiver like this to come with full preamp outs. While I understand there are cheaper receivers with preamp outs, most, if not all, only provide for a stereo pair. The 70 gives you the full boat, not to mention it can be placed into a preamp-only mode, which makes it one of the more cost-effective home theater processors currently available. Emotiva's own BassX processor isn't much cheaper, but it lacks a lot of the features available in the Cinema 70. If I were rocking a 5.1 or say a 5.1.2 Atmos setup, I'd pair the 70 with an Emotiva BassX or XPA 5-channel amp and just call it a day rather than spend more for the stellar Cinema 50. No, the 70 does not have Dirac or higher-end Odyssey support, but for the vast majority of you looking to put together, an easy-to-use home theater and stereo setup, the Cinema 70 more than fits the bill. Finding an apples-to-apples comparable receiver is actually a challenge. There are only a few options, and some lack the Cinema 70's ultimate flexibility and upgradability, but we're going to do it anyway, so here goes. Compared to the new Sony AN1000 receiver, the Sony is cheaper, currently retailing for around $700, and it does possess the brand's, secret spatial mapping sauce, but it is far more limited in terms of upgradability compared to the Marantz. If the Sony works for you, get it. It's an absolute steal. But if you are concerned about long-term flexibility, invest in the more future-proof receiver like the 70. For $300 less than the ONKYO RZ50, should you opt for the Marantz? Now, if you know you're not going to need more than, say, 7 channels, and you also know that your speakers and/or space can get by with a little less power, I'd consider the Marantz. While I prefer the styling and day-to-day livability of the Marantz, the RZ50 is the better overall receiver and still the undisputed king of receivers costing under $2,000. Lastly, we have the most comparable receiver, and that's the YAMAHA A4A. For about the same price, the Yamaha gives you the same number of channels, full preamp outs, and 8K60, 4K120 support. On paper, the A4A does offer up more power, albeit in stereo, though I suspect its all-channels-driven figures aren't too different from the Marantz. If you're newer to home theater or want a more design-friendly, space-saving receiver, get the Marantz because it's going to be the better option for you. But if you like to tweak and really get into the weeds, the Yamaha does allow for more customization and control. I have to say, without any hesitation, the Cinema 70 is by far Marantz's best slimline receiver yet. I mean, it's sleek. It has full preamp outs, finally. Not to mention a preamp only mode, and all of this at a price point that we don't see often from the competition. Is it the best receiver that money can buy? No, but it is one of the better home theater and stereo all-rounders to come to the market in a good long while. So that's enough out of me, but before we get out of here, what did you think of the Cinema 70?
I liked it.
Yeah?
I think it's impressive.
Yeah.
Especially with the right speakers. I think it's a great option for a lot of people. And I love that you can get it in silver. You can.
In the States?
Pretty sure. Unless, I don't know. I looked it up. There are some places where you can find it.
Okay.
If you don't, Marantz, offer it in the silver here, you're dumb.
Yeah. Get on that.
Because after seeing the Cinema 40 in the silver,
Which we have.
holy cow, it is gorgeous.
It's real nice.
It's real nice. It's
Rich.
back to the receiver.
Yeah, back.
I thought dialogue clarity was pretty good.
Yeah.
Not as good as the higher end receivers from Sony and ONKYO, but far more intelligible than Denon, at least for me.
Yep.
I would actually pick the 70 over the more budget friendly Sony AN1000.
Okay.
That's just, I don't know. It was good.
Yeah.
And I get it's really affordable and when it comes to receivers. Context is important.
Yeah.
When it comes to price. But I didn't love it.
Okay.
I love the 7000 that we use as a reference, and I get it. It's like $3-something grand. But honestly, it's really the only Sony I would get.
Okay.
We haven't heard the 5000, but
No, but it's probably going to be
it's
very comparable, just a fewer channels.
yeah. Anyway, but when it comes to the ONKYO,
Yeah.
now I found the RZ50 on sale at one retailer. I'm not going to tell you where. You're going to have to look in the description to find it. There's all sorts of stuff down there, people.
Yeah.
Making it the exact same price as a 70.
Really?
Yeah.
Whew. If you can get the RZ50 for the same price as the Cinema 70, then by all means, go with the RZ50. But yeah.
Yeah, as much as I love the look of Marantz, and I actually really enjoyed the sound, the price being equal,
Yeah.
I would get the ONKYO.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a steal. But at full retail, I think the decision becomes a lot harder to make.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk to you or go into more detail on, since we get so many questions from people asking, will this work with fill in the blank speaker?
Okay. Okay.
Besides the Focal Thivas, which sounded great, like you said, what speakers do you think will work with the 70 and which ones would you not pair with this receiver? And I'm talking about the 70 just by itself.
Just by itself.
Yeah, no external amp.
Okay, because as soon as you attach a quality external amp to this, all bets are off. It'll power anything.
No, and
It'll work with
I totally get that.
Yeah.
You know.
But that may not be what people initially do. So if you're relying purely on the 70, I would pair it with speakers that have a nominal 8 ohm load that maybe only dip down to, say, 6 ohms. It can do a 4 ohm speaker, but it's going to be happiest so long as that dip is somewhere above 4, below 8.
Well, speaking of the speakers that may need a little bit more power, I thought that the 70 sounded great with the Emotiva on the more expensive Bowers and Wilkins we had when they first arrived. But visually, the look of that combination is just a bit much.
Yeah.
I was wondering, could you pair something like the Audiolab 8300 XP and get a similar response as the Emotiva, especially
Absolutely.
if you can get the Marantz in silver? You know, I just feel like visually that would be a lot more complimentary.
Oh, yeah. And it should be noted, Marantz does make a stereo amplifier, and of course they make that massive, like 16-channel home theater amplifier. And other multi-channel amps to consider, honestly, this would be an opportunity to peep Outlaw Audio because they kind of have the rounded edges on their front facades of their amplifiers, and they don't have a black look. It's kind of more of a graphite black, which does match the Marantz very well. Not sure what Outlaw's up to nowadays, but I do know you can still get their amps on like Amazon and stuff like that. So
We'll link to it below.
Yeah, that's not a bad option to pair as well. But yeah, I really think that the Cinema 70 is a great, just a great starter mid-level receiver. But then as you grow, it's not a receiver you're necessarily going to have to kind of chuck to the wayside in order to upgrade, because like you said, it's like you add a capable amplifier to this, put it in its preamp processor only mode, which effectively just turns off all of the internal amplification. This thing is dynamite. Absolutely killer. All right, guys, that is now our review of Marantz's brand new Cinema 70 Slimline receiver. What'd you think? What do you think of this line? Are you as big a fan of it as I am, or do you think it's more of kind of like a cutesy home theater toy? I want to know. Be respectful, but I do want to know, how do you view a product like this? Because I happen to think it's the future, and the fact that Marantz put full preamp outs on this bad boy kind of makes it untouchable to me. Anyway, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified. If you use any of the links that Kristi has politely reminded you about in her portion of the review, know that that is a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that both of us do here. And we thank you all very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile. Almost forgot that. And that's it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next Sunday on the next video.